Hello everyone and welcome to today's Cavern tour. Thank you all for joining us. This is going to be the last tour date of this season. We're going to go on break for a few months and probably we'll be picking up again with a new season come December. That has yet to be finalized because we'll have to wait until we can coordinate everyone's schedule closer to the date. This is also the last day that Zeke 365 will be part of the Cavern Tour team. He's retiring from the team and also from Uru for a while. There will be a party for Zeke tomorrow in the Cavern Events Tour at 1300 key time. We are currently in Gahreesen 2. This is the second building of the complex and the main fortress. The word Gahreesen is made up of three Dene words, Garo, Aria, and Senarin, which means great building for protection, or in other words, a fortress. However, Gahreesen sounds enough like the word garrison, and it was also a place where there was a garrison of Dene, and so that word is often used in its place. Gahreesen 2, which is this building, was much more elaborately protected than the first building that you arrive at. The doors are more heavy-duty, they have a more elaborate locking system, and the doors themselves are studded with additional sensors that are not present on the doors in the first building. We are currently in a high-security prison located at the top of Gahreesen 2. Everyone is hearing me, correct? Okay, good. Michael Simpson was the restoration engineer who was assisting Victor Laxman with the study and restoration of this age. And he kept a notebook that I'm going to be quoting from occasionally as we go from one place to another. About this section, he wrote, "I'm not going up now, but we do know that the upper portions were used as prison cells. Typical Dene technology. They had a single linking book that went to all the cells. Since the building was always rotating, a very complicated linking apparatus and timing mechanism was associated with the book. The timing of the link would determine which cell the person linked into. Apparently, it was very tight. Speaking of linking, this entire building is rotating as well. It seems that most visitors came on the path from the well, although there were other books directly to this building. Had to be. It seems that many of them also used the timing mechanism to link to specific rooms. Looks like another new feature designed and built by these guys. One of many, I'm sure. I'm just wondering where the main research labs were, or better yet, where did everyone sleep or eat?" Here in the prison, when Gahreesen was constructed, a small high-security prison was included in the plans. From the size, it was probably intended mainly for use in holding prisoners who were either awaiting trial or punishment, or perhaps were about to be released. To make escape as difficult as possible, it was built at the top of Gahreesen 2 with a very thick layer of solid nara between the bottom of the prison and the rooms of the headquarters below it. There is no method of traveling between the two parts of the structure. The prison is only accessible by linking from outside the age. Long-term prisoners would not have been kept here. They were usually sent to prison ages, and while there are references also to death ages, it was very rare for the Denis to impose a death penalty. This facility has 3 levels. The top is open to the air. We are on the 2nd level, and the 3rd level is a series of tunnels that allow access to the cells when they wanted to move prisoners. In this room, you'll see cots for 2 prisoners, and then on this wall where I'm standing, if you look over to my left and your right, you will see a hatch in the floor, assuming you can see it all with all these people in here. And above that, there is a chain and manacle system directly over the manhole, which presumably was used to lower prisoners out of the cell, since they got in here in the first place by linking. On the floor of the wall behind me, if you're able to see, there is a slot cut into it down near the base of the wall. That was probably used to slide food trays with food and water on them into the prison cell for the prisoners to eat. There are bones in here, but they are not human, and we'll be talking more about those in a little while. What we're going to do now is we're going to drop down through the manhole out into the corridor, and then we're going to wait there. While we're down in those corridors, you will want to make sure that you stay behind me and not run ahead, so that we're always certain about where we're going. If you will now follow me, we're going to go down. Okay, once we're all down here in the corridor, we're going to move towards away from the window, make a right turn, go to the first transverse corridor that we come to, and make another right turn. When you get to the end of the corridor, you're going to want to look to your left at the side corridor that branches off. In here, you will see the remains of one of the last prisoners in this age. This age, of course, was affected by the fall of Denis, either by Vaothis and Gahreesen throwing in infected bodies and piping in poison gas through the linking book, or else because the maintainers were called out for the emergency situation and were never able to return. Either way, there were prisoners in the cells when that happened. This man managed to pry up the manhole in his cell, only to find out that once he'd gotten down into the corridor, that it was blocked off by these bars, which can only be lifted out of the way by the maintainers. And so he probably died here of thirst when enough time had passed. There's probably bodies in other cells, but we don't know that for certain since we've never been able to see them. Speaking out of character for a moment, Kitty, no, there were never any Baro in here. For one thing, you can't keep a Baro in here because they can link as they please. I actually went over the script for this tour with Richard Watson, who worked on this age. And he told me that there were no real significance to a lot of the bones, and that the artists who were putting the age together actually borrowed the bones from other places rather than make their own. So in this particular case, the skeleton that you see behind me is the same one that the skeleton of Kadish that we find in Kadish Tolesa. So that leads me to make the joke, even in death, Kadish really knew how to get around. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back down the corridor. We're going to make a left. We're going to go to the second corridor, and then we're going to make another left. So if you'll follow me. Did I get turned around? Hang on a minute. It looks like I may have miscounted. Okay. We've got one person out of voice chat range, but I'm going to continue anyway. From the outside looking in, to the left, there you will see another set of bones. Those bones and the ones that were up in this prison cell. Hold on just 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. Somebody was sending me a message. Now, what I was going to mention earlier is that you will notice that those bones are very noticeably not human. I asked Richard Watson about that, and he said there were no significance to them. Again, it was just a case of the game artists wanting to have a set of bones to use, and instead of making their own, they borrowed them from other ages. In this case, those are non-human bones from the age of Teledon, where you find them in the prison cell there. And to answer the other question again, those are not Baro. There never were any Baro in any of the prison cells simply because there's no way to keep them there. Baro have tattoos on their bodies which allow them to link at will wherever they want, so no prison can possibly hold them. So you can assume that those were actually meant to represent human prisoners that were left here, but it was simple laziness on the part of the game artists that they appear to be non-human. For those of you who are experiencing lag, you want to sit down when you can and turn off shadows in your game's video settings. Those two things will both help. Zeke, actually, no, the Denis were human. We would have considered them exceptionally tall. The average height was about 7 feet, but they were still very much human. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move up to the next major stop. So go ahead and click on the bot and PM the word or the letter W to him. Okay, if you look over here towards the outside wall, you'll recall me mentioning that there were something about food slots. If you look at the base of this wall, you will notice that spaced along it, three per side of the six-sided wall, are the other ends of those food slots. Each one of those represents one prison cell with two prisoners possible. There are 18 cells, so that means this prison had a potential to hold up to 36 people. This corridor is where the prisoners would have been brought to once they were being removed from the cells and moved to wherever it was that they needed to go. For instance, if they were awaiting trial, they would be taken down this corridor to the control room in order to be taken to stand trial. If they were being released, the same thing. Or if their sentence had been passed and they were being sent to a prison age. Behind you all, on the inside wall of the corridor, is the manhole that we would normally have climbed up if we were using the ladders. There are 6 of those manhole covers spaced along this corridor. The Denis guards, instead of going down in one particular place and then going through the entire corridor system to get to a particular cell, would simply open up the manhole that was closest to where the prisoner was, install a ladder and that safety cage around it, and then they would go get the prisoner from while having to take the least number of steps they would have to. We're now going to move to the control room, so just follow along with me. Okay, looks like everyone's in voice range. This is the control room where the maintainers on duty would have monitored the prison cells. You'll notice that around the room there are 2 viewers. Those viewers are showing the layout of this floor of the prison. The 18 ovals that you see around the circumference of the image, each are one of the prison cells. I'm not sure if they had a way of actually seeing the activity of the prisoners inside the cells, but that's the layout of the level. I am standing next to a suit of armor, and there is another one across the room. This armor is the same type that the Denis used when investigating a brand new age where they were unsure of the safety. It's the heaviest type of armor that the maintainers had. And they would have linked into a new age with this to protect themselves while they were getting initial readings. You will notice that the suit is mounted on a gimbal system, which would swing it out in the room and then allow it to turn to face various directions. That's because you will notice that the legs of the suit are not mobile. apparently the suit was not designed to move from wherever it was that it landed. We'll be talking more about them when we get downstairs. Finally, to my right and your left, there is a key dispenser here. We're not entirely sure what the purpose of this particular key machine was. There are three guesses. One is that it may have been used to issue key devices to prisoners who were being released. The second is that it may have been used to program and upgrade the key devices belonging to the guards. Or the third is that if a key device had been confiscated from a prisoner, then the guards could have used this machine to destroy it. Do we have any questions about anything we've covered up to this point? We have no idea how they actually controlled anything. If you look around, there's nothing obvious like a control panel to raise the bars into the various corridors or anything like that. Say, as far as the same thing with getting into the armored suits, we simply don't know how they did it. Zeke, as far as, if I remember correctly from what was written, there are something like 5 different levels of key device. Atisma, the key devices were altered, would have been programmed with various security levels for the guards so that they could get where they needed to go. Given that key devices also functioned as as electronic keys for various doors, it's also possible that by reprogramming them here, that would have been how they got past the barred corridors. Just by walking up with the appropriate key, it's possible that they would have opened. Our current key device is probably something like level 2, although I can't say for certain. It's kind of peculiar because our key devices will not let us do an awful lot of things, but they're good for all of the security doors in this building, which you would think would be a higher security level than average. Okay, everyone's in voice range. This is the third and final level of the prison, and the only part of it where a person could get to the outside world. Only guards would have been stationed up here, and they would have had two jobs. One is looking down on the corridor when prisoners were being transferred so that they could assist if there was trouble. The second purpose was to guard against the outside world. Gahreesen is a place which is known for having gigantic animals that were described as being monsters. And apparently some of them could fly because even this high up off the ground, there are still defenses and spikes and barriers placed up here against the local wildlife. If you look up the center of the building and also outwards, you will see a number of barriers and defenses that have been placed against the animals. Go ahead and do that now, and then we'll move on to our next location. Oh, I was also going to mention these devices at the end of each of the bridges. These are apparently sensors, either motion sensors or perhaps some sort of life detectors. We don't know for sure. But again, security up here was extremely tight, and they didn't want anyone or anything getting in unannounced. Not that we've seen tiger lily. We just know that there are 18 of them because it's on the map, and you can count the number of food slots on the wall. That's correct, Tiger Lily. We are standing directly above the cells where we are now. We are now down in the headquarters level of the maintainer unit that trained and operated here. This maintainer unit was divided into two teams that were coded yellow and purple, and you can tell which team's rooms you're in because the predominant color will be one of those two. This is one of, on each side of the building there are 3 identical rooms. If you look at the viewer over at the 1 o'clock position relative to the door leading outside, that is a map of this level of the building, showing all 6 of the rooms. In these conference rooms, they would have had meetings with various officials, which may have included members of the Guild of Writers. If you look up at this, where the wall meets the ceiling, you will see the symbol of the Guild of Writers spaced around it. Whereas on the lamp over the center of the conference table, you will see the symbol of the Guild of Maintainers. Gimper, please PM that message to Murphac. He's the technician. Michael Simpson said about these rooms, well, I guess these rooms were where the bigwigs sat down and talked about their maintainers. Obviously, they are set up to watch the wall, and there are displays that show the patterns being built and played on the wall. We'll never know it, but I can see the guildmasters in here watching their teams compete, preparing to send them out to some radioactive fireball age to see if their new suits can stand the elements. The Guild of Writers and the Guild of Maintainers were close partners in many respects, since the Maintainers were responsible for approving, policing, and, if necessary, destroying the ages written by the writers. You will notice that there are 2 viewers in here that are displaying the wall. That's because one shows one side of it and the other shows the other. We're going to move from outside this room into the corridor and then directly into the room opposite this one. However, please do not go down the steps. We don't want you accidentally triggering the door mechanism out there. Okay, this is as long as I'm going to wait. Michael Simpson called this a mud room. He wrote, "I'm not sure what to call these things, but they remind me of mud rooms, so I'll call them that. Not much here. Looks like each bridge has a mud room attached to it with another group of doors, etc. There doesn't seem to be any kind of decompression or decontamination that went on here. Really, they just seem to be nothing more than another spot for another set of doors, another secure location." The rooms that Simpson calls mud rooms are airlock-style security chambers that were intended to limit the number of people who could enter the building at once. There are 6 of these rooms, one at the base of each of the 6 bridges leading out into the rest of the age. The rooms are bare with 3 security doors, one on the interior and 2 leading to the outside. None of them can be opened at the same time. Inside of the mud rooms are steps leading up to the main level, which is higher than the building's entrances. In here, you get the first look at a peculiarity of the building that has not yet been explained officially. If you look at the walls on either side, you will see bulges with a light on them and small ports in them. We're not, again, there's been no official explanation as to what those bulges are for, but one guess is that they may hold mechanisms for flooding the room and the corridor outside with some kind of gas, perhaps an anesthetic, in order to provide an additional layer of security if people manage to get loose and past the security. We're now going to walk out into the corridor and stop there. Tiger Lily, that was specifically mentioned by Simpson, is that he did not think that any sort of decontamination happened. Something that I wanted to point out here is that I'm standing next to another of the same type of machine that we saw up on the roof, which presumably are motion or life detectors of some sort to provide security in the form of keeping track of anything moving in the corridors. Theo just asked if the bulges could have been murder holes for crossbow bolts or something like that. And the answer to that one is, who knows? You could be right. Richard Watson did not remember what that design was for. So whether it's gas, crossbow bolts, or something completely different, at this point, anybody's guess is as good as anyone else's, including mine. We're now going to walk down the corridor behind me to the next room. Okay, let's see. Atelka, Seni, Hummingbird, Yoda, and Thoakinum are all outside of voice range. That was basically the last request. Now from here, I'm going to just continue, and they can catch up as they please. Okay. This area was known as the training room, or I should say, the training rooms were basically each side of the building. Okay. Anyway, this was essentially a control room for for one of the two maintainer teams that made up the garrison here. In this room, the first thing that you see are these mysterious spherical objects which appear to be on moving arms. These objects are unexplained. However, I do have a theory about them, and Richard Watson did not have anything to say against it. And that is that these were training machines for people learning how to use the heavy environment armor that they would be sent to a new age in. The training facility here was meant to test and train the maintainers physically, mentally, and also technically for their duties. The facility was also a research center where new technologies were developed that would eventually be released out for the rest of the maintainers to use. The heavy environment armor that we'll be seeing in a moment would, of course, or is immobile and hard to get into and out of. So I suspect that these machines allowed them to simulate a person in that armor being sent to an unstable environment so that they could get used to working in it under adverse conditions without actually being in any danger. At the end of the room, we have a control panel with a seat. This, of course, is the control panel for one of the two teams to set up the wall. The wall that you see through the window here is a training device as well as a contest. Two teams of up to about maybe 5 people would be sent into the chamber, and their task was to climb up to the top of that wall. We don't know if there was any sort of a point system. If there were, then it may have been along the lines of the first team to reach the top, the team with the most members to reach the top, or some other system entirely. What we do know is that each team set a maze up for the opposing team. And then once the maze was set up, there's that, Angel Mist. Because what they would do is they would set up each one of the blocks that you see to where once you touch them, they would become smooth and you wouldn't be able to get a grip on it. So yes, falling was probably a common occurrence. And then once they had set that up and put the team inside the room and activated the mechanism, other conditions would be added, perhaps by the people in the conference room, perhaps by the people here, we don't know. but they would have all sorts of adverse conditions that they would have to climb that wall through, such as high wind, heavy rain, firestorms, acid baths, pretty much anything that you can imagine them having to face if they went into a poorly ridden age would be replicated in that room. The next place that we're going to go is the last room on this side of this level, and we're going to do that by walking to a corridor just a few steps away from this. Atisma, presumably they could have done running exercises in the corridor outside. As far as swimming or anything like that, well, we are sitting out in the middle of a river valley, so that is also an activity that would have been doable outdoors. There is a booklet written about the control panel, how to set it up and conduct one of the games without the adverse conditions. I don't remember off the top of my head where that notebook is located. I do have a copy of it on my website. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and continue. Simpson referred to this as a display room, having made a mistake as to its purpose. He wrote, "Not sure that these were originally display rooms, or maybe they were. Either way, there are quite a few old maintainer suits in here. There is also the latest maintainer suit or skin here. I guess I should say the machine to put on the latest maintainer suit is in here. Now that we've had some time to look at this, it's incredible. We're talking about a suit that was skin-tight, had linking abilities, etc., built in. Very high-tech as far as maintainer suits go. Very impressive. A maintainer would fall down the chute, and while traveling to the interior room / the wall, the suit would be placed on him. I'm begging to try this thing, but the DRC is insistent no one does. Laxman already has someone on it trying to figure out more. I'm first when they do. I think these rooms could basically be described as team locker rooms. And it was Simpson's final conclusion that is the correct one. These rooms were equipment storage and dressing rooms for one of the two teams. The niches were meant to hold the maintainers' individual armored suits that they wore while they were on duty. When getting ready for a training scenario on the wall, the maintainers would take off their duty armor and hang it in the niches. They would then enter the machine that is over to my left, which would dress them in a special hermetically sealed environment suit before setting them down inside the wall chamber. If you look to my right, this is an actual set of the regular duty armor that the maintainers wore at all times when they were on duty. This particular suit was left in its niche during the time of the fall of Denis, probably because the maintainer that owned it was unable to retrieve it before dying as a result of the plague spread by the fall. If you'll look, you'll see the helmet here is identical to the one in the locker room in the other building here in Gahreesen. And also there's another of these on Sharper's desk in Teledon. If you look at the back end of the room, you'll see another one of the heavy armor suits. The maintainers had light and heavy armor plating, and it was not made of metal. Instead, it was made of a material called Gahreesen, a dense yet lightweight extruded stone product developed by the Guild of Stonemasons in the Denis year 5236. On the surface, that would have been 2421 BC. The Guild of Maintainers began constructing armor made of Gahreesen in year 5473 of the Denis calendar. That was an innovation that allowed the Guild of Writers to be more experimental when writing new ages, since the maintainers sent to evaluate the ages were better protected from harsh or potentially fatal environments. The heavy armor suits are studded with sensors and measuring devices, and the first maintainer to link to a new age would wear one. If he found the conditions to be hospitable, a follow-up team in light armor would come along to begin the full investigation of the age. They would be accompanied by members of other guilds, such as the guilds of cartographers, surveyors, and healers, to do their own evaluations of the age, to do some initial mapping, and also to determine whether or not there were any harmful plants or animals or diseases in the age. The surveyors would also set up a zero mark somewhere in the age to establish the coordinate system so that the surveyors could, or the cartographers could do their mapping. One of these is mentioned in the Book of Denis, which was an account of Atris and his search for Denis survivors of the fall. According to that, there are two linking books that would be set inside the suit underneath the maintainer's hands. The first book would be used to link the maintainer to the age that he was going to investigate. Once used, the book, of course, would remain behind and he would have nothing left under that hand. The second book was a book back to either here or wherever it is they wanted him to end up at the end of his trip. Linking is done by pressing living flesh against the linking panel of the book, although you can have on something like gloves or some other material between your hand and the book and it won't affect it. However, due to a limitation in Denis linking, their art of linking, you couldn't take a book with you when you linked. Therefore, the book that you touched would remain behind. So so the book that was necessary to get back would be under his other hand. And when he was done, he would link back to wherever the second book was going to take him, and that book would be left behind in the age he was investigating. If the age were safe, they would then be able to recover the book later. Okay, do we have any questions about anything we've covered up to this level, on this level up to this point? Guild of Guilds. As far as it being made by the Barrow, that is an absolute no. 99.9% of the Dani people had no idea that the Barrow existed. In fact, we're not even sure who did. That's because the creation of a linking book, even a well-written one, was an extremely random thing. When a linking book is, when a descriptive book, I should say, is written, you put in what you would like the age to be. But there was and then the magic involved in it, I guess we'll say, would search throughout time, space, and dimensions in order to find a world or a section of a world that most closely matched what was described in the book. However, because it is a highly random thing, searching through millions upon millions of possible worlds, you never quite know what exactly you're going to find on the other side, even in a very well-written book. That's why they were very cautious when they first linked into it, because even a well-written book could have something in it that could prove to be lethal. Another way to put it is that they were describing in the books what they wanted to find there, but they were attaching themselves to existing worlds that may have had other things besides what were written in the book. No other questions? It could, but the Denis were especially careful about that, Theo. The reason being that they had learned over thousands of years to be extremely cautious, and that's why they had such ironclad rules about how they wrote books. Generally speaking, if you tried to write something into an age, instead of actually just taking whatever you got, more often than not, it did not turn out well. Yes, and that was an example of somebody actually writing something after the fact and adding it to an age. The Denis would have been horrified by that, though, because there were so many ways that that could have gone wrong that the mind boggles. Catherine was an extremely talented writer, and she got away with it that time. However, later on, she wouldn't. She wrote one of her more creative ages later in her life, and that age wound up killing Anna, and at that point, it really sank in how dangerous what she was doing was, and Catherine never wrote another linking or descriptive book after that. Riven was an age that they didn't mind messing around with, Atris and Catherine, that is, simply because it was deteriorating and doomed to eventual destruction, and that was known to them. However, Catherine was the only one who actually tried to alter it in any way. Atris simply tried to stabilize it as best he could so that it would last a little longer. Cindy, those are actually two different categories that have some bleed over. A descriptive book is the first book that you write, which establishes a link to another world. And that, whereas a linking book is another type of book that is written after the fact. Once you have a connection to your new world and through the linking panel on the descriptive book, you go there, you find a spot that you would like to have another place to come into, and then you can write a linking book in that spot and establish a connection there. Linking books are much more simple than the initial descriptive book and don't take anywhere near as much time or effort to write. And that's how you get a different linking points at different points within the same age. And at this point, let's see, we better move on. We've only got 2 more stops to make before the end of the tour, but these ones you should enjoy. A word of warning. Where we're going next is dangerous. You can crash the entire game by doing the wrong thing. What we're going to do is we're going to go into the chamber with the wall so that you can see it. However, do not climb on the ladder there. Do not attempt to touch the wall itself. And there is a glowing button under one of the windows. Do not touch that button. Doing those things has the potential of crashing out the game, and we'll have to reestablish everything. If you will come over here, the tube that you see above me with the green symbol on it is the other end of the machine that dressed the maintainer in the environment suit and then dropped them on into this chamber for the contest. And yes, Kitty, we are in the training room now. That is the wall behind us. Again, don't climb up on it. You will ruin things. In a moment, I'm going to allow you to explore a little bit and to use bot commands so that you can float and get a look at it from various angles. Murphak, can you turn on the colors the way Stone did last night? Over in the center of the room, you will notice that there are 2 large grates over pits. Those would have been for rainwater acid, whatever it was that they were pumping into here to drain out. And I suppose if if a maintainer's environment suit failed and he turned into a puddle of goo, they could use it to wash him down too. That's not a question I can answer since I've never been down there, Kitty. The pedestal over here was designed to hold a linking book to a special version of Nexus that was written specifically for the maintainers. Speaking out of character for a moment, I did ask Richard Watson about the glowing button on this, and he said that it was just a placeholder. This pedestal was designed to actually have a linking book on it, but apparently they just never got around to finishing the graphics. And then at this point, go ahead and wander around this side of the room and look around. You can take any pictures you might like to take before we go to our final destination. Just don't climb up on the wall. Kitty, you've been on these tours long enough to know what a mess it is trying to recover from a crash. We are trying everything in our power to try and keep that from happening again. Yes, I was going to mention that. You will notice that there are a lot of burns, scars, and other stains of mysterious origin in this room. And that's a mark of exactly the kind of training that they did here. and welcome to the special maintainer version of Nexus. This is a completely separate age from Gahreesen. Like the regular Nexus that we use when we go to the island or to the neighborhoods, this was placed here because of the limitation in Denis technology, which meant that you could not link directly from one place in an age to another without going outside. Maintainers who had either reached the top of the wall or who pressed the linking panel in the book below the window would be sent here. In the middle of the room, you'll notice a large circular platform with the maintainer symbol on it. That is an elevator. When you first link here, normally, you wind up in a pit where the special maintainer's environment suit would be taken off you before the elevator lifted you up into this room. Once here, you will notice that there are two viewers which are showing the two sides of the wall. That way, maintainers who ended up here could remain and see what was going on with their teammates. Or, I am standing next to a Nexus machine, but this one, you will notice, has two lights on the front, one yellow, one purple, which represent the two teams. The books come out on a timer. When the yellow light is flashing, the book that comes out takes you to the control room for the yellow team, and when the purple light is flashing, and the book that comes out takes you to the purple control room. And that's how they would return to their to Gahreesen after they had completed their exercise. And that's it for today's tour, which we got through in about an hour and a half. That's a pretty good time. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and for those who stuck around for the entire season, thank you as well. This is the last tour of the season, and of course, I mentioned before that this is the last time that Zeke will be working with us. After this, we're going to have a little party with some stuff, with a laser light show being put on by Yoda for us. So stick around, and we'll see about getting you to that.